host, Marisa Slayton, and I'm so glad that you tuned in to watch us today. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about leadership courage and setting a vision. And our guest is Tiffany Williams. Tiffany Williams is a law professor. She is a former judge. She is an author. She is a nonprofit executive. She is a reverend. And she is also the first African-American to chair the New Jersey State Commission on Investigations, which is an independent agency appointed by the governor of New Jersey to investigate fraud and corruption. Tiffany has an extensive and accomplished career, and I am so glad that you decided to join us today. Welcome.
Well, thank you. I'm very excited to be here, to be in conversation with you, Marisa, as accomplished as you are. Anytime you invite me to a conversation, I will be there.
Awesome. And I should mention that we are friends, so I'm a little bit biased as well.
Absolutely. Me too.
So let's just start about you. You have a very lengthy bio, and I did not read it at all. So why don't you just tell our audience, who is Tiffany?
Well, keeping with your theme tonight, I am a leader. I'm a leader that loves leading. I'm passionate about leadership. I think from the time I was pretty young, I recognized that I really liked helping and serving people. So my definition really of leadership is to serve the needs of others and to bring resources to others. And that's what I've found that I have a passion for. I do it in every facet of my life. You read some of my bio. I love serving in public service. I love serving in ministry. I'm a Christian minister, a Christian pastor. And so throughout my life, I've always found opportunities to serve and use my faith as a guiding light and guiding principle. And 13 years ago, founded a nonprofit organization to empower women and girls as really a reflection of my faith. So I'm also a leader that really tries to lead in alignment with my values as well. And I'm someone who loves life. So I like to have fun as a leader. I love doing multifaceted things. As you said, I'm a professor, I'm a former judge. I've worked in, every branch of government. I've worked in the private sector, the public sector, nonprofit sector, the educational arena. And I really like to solve problems and see them from a multidisciplinary approach as well. So I feel like that really fits with the person that I am, the multifaceted person that I am as well. And like you, Marisa, I love the arts also. I am a former dancer and played musical instruments, the flute, the handbells, I was in a handbell choir. So I really love to still, even though life has taken me in a different direction than dance and playing the flute, I like to still incorporate a love and passion for the arts in my life and even in my leadership. I am married recently, about a year and a half now. And thank you. I found love later in life. I was 47, I believe, when I got married. So it was a beautiful journey to be able to really fulfill my purpose as a single woman, and then to find the love of my life, and now to really lead in life with a purpose partner. I'm a daughter, a big sister. I have 4 younger brothers, so I had to provide a leadership example for them as well. And I still continue to try to, though they are very accomplished men on their own. But I'm an auntie as well, and just very, very proud of my family connections. And I'm also a bonus mom now to a beautiful, amazing bonus daughter who's 21 years old. And so I'm really learning to lead even as a parent now in a different way too. So that's me.
That is quite dynamic, right? You have a number of hats and a lot of depth in the spaces that you are able to show up as a leader,
Mm,
both on your family side, in your professional space, in ministry,
mm.
in public service. So let's talk about this topic for today, right? Leadership, courage, and setting a vision. Why do you think that's an important topic for us to be covering?
Being a leader requires both. We have seen different models of leadership in our country in the past decade, around the world. We've seen different models of leadership, and in different sectors of society, we see different aspects of leadership. I think we've seen some highs and lows of leadership in those arenas. And sometimes there have been courageous decisions that have been made that we've seen, and we've seen the results. We've also seen sometimes when courageous decisions have not been made, and we see the results. And the same with vision. Vision is critical because people that you lead need to know where they're going. They'll follow you, but they'll follow you in a different sort of way, with different commitment and intentionality, and they'll follow with their heart if they understand the vision that you are casting. But a leader that's not courageous, I would question whether they're really a leader at all, because leadership requires courage. Absolutely.
So let's just build on that. What does courage look like?
Courage looks like strength.
Mhm.
Courage looks like sacrifice sometimes as a leader. Courage in leadership looks like being able to make hard decisions. Now, sometimes courage can be easier than other times, but there is still a requirement that there's some self-assessment as to what is in the best interest of individuals that you're leading. And sometimes that best interest is a short-term best interest, and sometimes it's a long-term best interest. So the leader has to know and be clear about what the priorities are. And whether you are, for example, with an organization, are you there to really turn it around? Are you there to get it out of a place where it's stuck? Or are you there to really prepare it for a future? Are you there to prepare it to really change course or direction? And so courage also looks like not being afraid to make decisions that may not be popular with others, particularly those that you lead, and sometimes those in your own immediate cabinet of advisors also. And that's where having a strong vision, this is where vision and courage really overlap. How do you measure whether something is the right courageous decision to make? How do you measure when, as a leader, you may have to make a decision that's not popular, even with your own advisors? You measure it by looking at the vision, and how does this decision further the vision? And we can't talk about vision without also talking about values, because vision casting should also be values driven. And so courageous leadership also looks like making hard, prudent decisions that will further the vision in alignment with the organization's values. Now, some organizations have not done the hard work of having a current statement of values, or may not be in agreement about what their values and priorities are. And so that can make it harder sometimes. So some courageous leadership becomes courageous because a leader is leading without the proper foundation having been set and consensus in the organization as to even the direction that they should go in. So sometimes courageous leadership calls out the areas of deficiency in an organization, or when an organization is not being integrous with the values that it has already prioritized as well.
Can you maybe provide us an anecdote, if you will, whether it's something from your personal experience where you were in a position that you had to take a tough decision or perhaps go against the grain, or maybe it's something that you observed from someone that you really respect and said, this is a decision, this is a behavior that you thought was compelling and moved the needle in a particular direction?
Sure. As a woman of color, as a Black woman,
Yeah.
I have experienced my share of bias, implicit bias, and I have not always worked for organizations that were very in tune, knowledgeable, or helpful in supporting me to navigate through that. And some organizations really perpetuated what I will characterize as I think bias and discrimination is violence, against the person that it's perpetuated against. So I have been in situations where I've had to really advocate for myself and be in a position where I felt like I was doing it perhaps at my own professional peril. So, even one academic institution that I had worked at in the past, I was really, experiencing some incidents of bias from my students. And I just didn't feel supported, even though I was on a diversity committee, even though the institution thought that it had a very charitable type of mission and environment. I had to exercise some courage as a new professor at that time, and one who did not have the economic surety that other professors had. I didn't have tenure. In fact, I didn't even have the possibility of tenure, because my role at the time was one where you had renewable kind of long-term, which weren't really that long-term, contracts. So it was a courageous decision for me to have to make, because it could impact my job. But I just decided that it was necessary for my own well-being, my professional advancement outside the walls of this institution, and my integrity and the integrity of what the institution said that they were about, to really be very vocal about what I had experienced and what my expectations were also of what the institution's responsibility was. Ultimately, I still never really saw, I thought, the institution really step up the way that I really needed them to step up. And I had to make a courageous step to really ask to change my status and to have a relationship there and a job there and a role there that was more in alignment with my agency there and my ability to really function in a way that really met my needs. So I was very nervous to kind of have the conversations that I needed to have, but I knew that as a woman who was leading other women, even in my own nonprofit, in their own empowerment, that I could not afford to shrink back at that moment. This was a test of, do I believe in what I preach to others? And so I'm very happy that I did step up, and it helped me to advance to where I am today. And ultimately, I ended up leaving that institution really because of geography when I got married. But it certainly helped me to have a foundation in seeking the next institution I decided to align myself with. I had that mindset, Marisa, of not just I'm looking for a job, right? I said, no, I want to actually align myself with an institution that has a certain value system and that I know will support me in these important areas. So that courageous step led me to really grow in my own professionalism, which reflected in my job search as well.
You've touched on a couple of really, I think, key points. One of them is about empowerment and how being vocal, and in your example, being vocal about your experience of bias and raising those concerns empowers others to do the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And demonstrates you as a leader and an example that perhaps even helps to shift the experience that others might be facing. You also talked about aligning with your values and
Yes.
in the workplace. And it's very interesting because, you have your personal values as a woman, as a professional, as a pastor or a reverend,
Yes.
and you work in these secular spaces, academia, government,
Yes.
the corporate space. Maybe talk with me a bit how you navigate, that balance between your personal belief system and, these really elevated spaces that you find yourself leading in.
Yeah, it happened in a very organic way, Marisa. And now that I look back, I feel that that was really a byproduct of the concept of walking in your purpose. So I see how, earlier in my life, in my career, faith has been very important to me. And I've always found a way to just hold on to my faith in various environments. So earlier in my career, when I had less agency and had less, leadership sort of ability institutionally in the places I worked, like in law firms, clerking for a judge, even working in government early in my career as a federal prosecutor. Those were places where I didn't really kind of bring my faith to the workplace in maybe tangible ways that I feel like I do a little more comfortably now. But I identified myself as a woman of faith. People knew that I attended church, and they knew that once I became a minister, that I was a minister and I preached, and they were intrigued by that. But people began to see me. They knew I left the law firm on Wednesdays to go to Bible study, which may require me to come back after Bible study and keep working, to make up for those hours I was gone. So they knew that there was something which was unusual, right? Because most people stayed at the firm and just worked, and they didn't have outside responsibilities that would conflict with billing those billable hours. So I think people noticed that there was something about my faith traditions that was important to me that caused me to always make room for it. So I began to see that people would sometimes ask me about my faith, or even ask me to pray for them, or want to confide things in me, or have my confidence, or when they were in a vulnerable kind of point in their life, they ended up coming to me. So it made me more confident about how important it was to identify myself as a person of faith, and just let these very providential sort of experiences continue to happen. And then, and the whole time, Marisa, I'm also in my own faith practice praying that God would use me for his glory, to be a light in dark places, to have the words of comfort and of love and of empowerment to speak into people who were discouraged or going through something, feeling vulnerable, feeling alone. That was my personal prayer. And then I began to see that playing out. And so then, ironically, coincidentally, or maybe not, I started to get leadership roles where I had institutional authority to be that person. So I became, a chief counselor to certain leaders. I became the ethics officer to leaders and to their staff, both in the New Jersey General Assembly and the governor's office. And it allowed me to have a posture in the lives of leaders where they could open up to me about vulnerabilities, right? When you're giving ethics advice to someone, They want to make sure that their behavior is ethical and they don't get in trouble or do something that would expose them even to legal liability. So I began to see how my faith played a role in my ability to really be a compassionate, trustworthy, confidential advisor with integrity. And so that led to me even developing very intimate relationships with those that I served, to the point that I would sometimes send them inspiration with their consent if they were interested. So they joined my text scripture list that I would text out a Bible scripture, and that list ended up growing to like 400 something people over time. And most of them were people I encountered at work. And then as things went on, I decided that I wanted to, and as a judge, I had to be more careful about that, right? Because judges have to be very independent. You can't give off the impression that even something like your faith is something that can bias you in any way. Non-Christians had to feel comfortable in your courtroom that you're going to give them justice to. So I had to grow in my leadership as to how to navigate that in a way that also made others feel comfortable that I could still be an independent mind as a judge. But after leaving my judgeship and going into academia, one of the motivating factors was I wanted to be so I'm sorry, let me go back. But during all this time, I'm growing in my ministry also. So I'm preaching throughout the country. I'm going to other countries and preaching. So all of this is growing outside of work. And I just decided that I really want to be one thing, just period. One thing. I don't want to go to work and necessarily have to watch this and that and the other. I just want to be one thing everywhere I am. And I felt like academia was the place that would allow me really the greatest expression of all of who I am. So I can write about the intersection of law and faith. I taught a class about faith, and the law. At every law school I've taught at, I have brought my ministry, my women's empowerment ministry. I've done biblical leadership studies at the law schools I've taught at. So I've had, law students to really come to me just, even privately, to understand what it means to be a person of faith and to build their spirit. So I feel that I have now come to the place which I think every leader should aspire to come to, where you can come to work, to your place where you lead, and be all of who you are. So I was very proud, Marisa, when Governor Murphy asked me to serve as the chair, the first African-American chair of the State Commission of Investigation. And in the press release, he actually used my title of Reverend. And to this day, I have members of the public, when we do public hearings, who may reach out to me, and they'll go to my church's website or my nonprofit's website to kind of find me. They know that I am a person of faith, and they can find me in the community, in my places of faith, to reach me. They'll send me notes, through the church's social media. They'll call me Reverend Tiffany. So I love that I can serve the state of New Jersey in this capacity, busting corruption, right, as outwardly a woman of faith, an ordained minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, a pastor, and someone who is yet a lawyer, former judge. And I love that God is showing me how he is just removing even the perception that some have that people of faith have to stay in one box or one corner, and that corner being all about faith. But we are in the world, and that is what we are supposed to do, and to be multifaceted as we do it.
So now you are, in addition to being the chair on the State Commission of Investigation, you were also a law professor at Howard University. You
Yes.
have, 20 years or so of teaching experience at different institutions. You've been a judge. You're an executive or CEO and founder of the Esther Institute for the Advancement of Women and Girls. And so you've
Yes.
seen individuals at various stages of their professional career. Why do you think, or perhaps what advice would you give to an individual who is finding it challenging to bring their whole self to work?
I would say that that person should increase their prayer life if their faith is one aspect of what they're finding hard to integrate. Um, if they're not a person of faith, I would tell them that they have to nurture their spirit and really think, for both persons of faith and those that are not, you have to think about the big picture and the big question. Why am I here on earth?
Mm.
What is my purpose? What are the gifts and talents that are inside of me that are meant to be given to the world during this time? What am I seeing in the world that's compelling to me? What do I get upset about? What makes me angry when I look at what's going on in the world? Maybe there's something inside of me that's a passion that has an answer to that problem. Who are the people that are drawn to me? What are the things that people say to me that I do really effortlessly and very well that they can't do? These are signals. What are the experiences that I have been through in life, the good and the bad, that give me a unique perspective of credibility to others that may be struggling in that area or maybe unseen in that area? For me, I definitely feel like I am called to empower others to step up into their purpose and to build their leadership skills and to see what it is that is inside of them that they can contribute. And how do you sharpen those skills? I can help people solve problems, whether I have an expertise in your problem or not, because I've just developed a way of thinking about problem solving and resources. I'm able to help people to strategize in their own life as well. So I would say that when you feel what I'll call what you've described as maybe stuck, that's an aspect of being stuck. When you feel like you can't bring your whole self to your job or to your life, you may be stuck, but it's time to maybe rediscover who you are and allow that man or woman to shoot forth. In the Esther Project, I often tell women, encourage them, I should say, to take off the mask. Sometimes we can't bring our whole self because there's not room for our whole self because we're wearing a mask and a costume. So you may have to take that mask off, unzip that costume, and show us who you really are. And you may realize that you don't fit in that environment. And that's why you feel like you can't bring your whole self. Now, being a judge was an amazing experience. And for me, until I achieved it, that was my life ambition. Once I achieved it, once I experienced it, once I got my lessons from it, I realized that I was not intended to do that for the rest of my life. I mean, I am blessed that I achieved it by the time I was 36 years old. But by the time I was in my early to mid 40s, it was time now to move on. Why? Because I discovered the woman of purpose that was inside of me that was bigger than a job, and it was bigger than being a judge. So I now, in taking off my mask and unzipping, my suit and revealing, the superwoman inside of me, so to speak, really the woman of purpose inside of me, I realized I needed another environment. And in fact, Marisa, what I realized is that when you are really stepping into your power and realizing your significance, that there may be no environment here on earth that's big enough for you other than the one you are meant to create for yourself. So I encourage leaders to also think about, what is the entrepreneurial platform that you may need to create to own your purpose? And how are other endeavors, perhaps, aspects of where you show up for your purpose? So when I was going through that hardship at my former institution, I had to get my mind right. And I had to reevaluate my value proposition. And that's when I knew that I was actually too big for that institution. And I had to think about, this institution is one part of my larger platform and life. So I had to not shrink myself, but remember, I'm only giving a part of who I am to this institution. But there are other places and spaces in my life where I'm giving other aspects of myself. So I almost think of it as like, this is a contract that I have to perform this particular function of work, but I'm bigger than this job. And when I adopted that mindset, which is one that is in alignment with the truth of who I am, I really started to flourish in my leadership, in my courage, in my vision, going back to where we started this conversation. And that was another moment where I took off another mask, because sometimes, we have a mask on top of a mask on top of a mask. So taking off the mask is not a one-time thing. So I realized there was another layer that I had to step out of. And, even now in the season I'm in, Marisa, sometimes life change shows you that, I've been married now for a little bit, and I feel like, all right, I may be moving to even yet another plateau. But now I'm always in a perpetual state of like kind of getting ready for that next level while enjoying the level that I'm on.
I think enjoyment is very key to taking your mask off and being yourself, right? Because I do believe that authenticity is essential for enjoyment. And like you're saying, if you're wearing masks and if you're wearing like cloaks, you're not being your authentic self.
Yes.
And so I think that there's a disconnect between who you are showing up as and who you are truly, right? Who you are designed to be, who are you, and how you are designed to be showing up in spaces. Yes. So I want to thank you for how you framed that out for us today. And as I'm starting to wrap up this interview, there's a segment that I like to call Leader to Leader, where I give you an opportunity to pose a question. If there was a question that you would challenge other leaders to answer, such that they could deepen their effectiveness as leaders or their impact in the community, what would that question be?
So I alluded to some of them in my last answer, but I think I'll encapsulate it into asking, who are you really? Who are you really? And are you focused in your time on the things that only you can do? I learned from a leader that I follow on social media, Michael Hyatt, read many of his books and go to his seminars. And, when he's teaching about productivity for leaders and how you should actually spend your time, He talks about how important it is to begin to delegate things and also not spend your time on things that other people can do. So we ask you the question, what is it that only you can do? Because that's the highest use of your time. So in preparing for this podcast, right? You have a vision of what you want it to be, Marisa, and maybe others can help you come up with questions. But maybe you are the only person that can really right now for your goals interview others and really get out the topics from others and get out from their heart what you want your viewers to see, right? But maybe there are other things that you could delegate to others. So constantly being aware as a leader how you're spending your time. Sometimes we don't advance as leaders because we're spending our time on low-level tasks and activities that never allow us to use our gifts and our creativity at the highest level. So the first question I'd ask is, who are you really? Which alludes to your purpose, your authenticity, and your ability to take off those masks. And then, are you spending your time on the things that only you can do? And I hope this helps someone.
I believe that it will. Who are you really, and how are you spending your time? Critical to success. So I want to thank you, Reverend Tiffany, Judge Tiffany, Professor Tiffany, for being with us today and really sharing what you have learned over the years and what God has placed on your heart. And I want to just thank you for being present and bringing your authentic self to work. Just anecdotally, when I first met you, I came into your office at the law firm and you had prayer hands, like little sculpture of prayer hands on the windowsill. And that was a visual for me, right, of how you were integrating your faith into this law firm environment where you don't really see that level of expression.
Wow.
And we had to talk about it.
Yes.
Right? We had to talk about it because you're like, well, hands, hands that are clasped, it's not a religious symbol, but it clearly has a religious meaning when you see hands that are clasped like that. Yes. And so I thought that was a courageous step for you, a courageous example of living out your truth in corporate spaces. So again, thank you for being here today. And I wish you continued success in your career.
Well, thank you for this conversation. And I want to encourage you to continue this initiative. It has helped me tonight to reflect more also on why I do what I do and how I can continue to grow. And I'm looking forward to the future conversations that you have with other leaders too. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you.